Okay, you've heard at times schools reject toilet training for students because they lack the resources or it isn't an educational goal. Is there anything parents can do to ensure that basic self-care skills are addressed by IEP team goals? Um, okay, when it comes to IEP team goals, all right, you have to sit there and back this stuff up to the beginnings of special education law and some of these definitions with regards to how particular words are defined in IDEA and special education law. Those things all carry over and are very important to the final determination of what goals need to be developed, what areas need to have attention paid to it, and it varies widely. That's why we call them individualized education programs. So you have to sit there and back this up to where you understand what special education by definition is under the law. All right. And that's just differentiated. I'm not going to go into the big definition, but it's basically differentiated learning. All right. So, and we call it specialized instruction. We're sort of getting away from using the word special education, and it's more specialized instruction, which I think is a better word or terminology because what we're doing is it's almost hyper-focused, or I'm going to say almost. It is hyper-focused on whatever the deficit skill set is that we're trying to remediate, trying to teach, all of those things. So you have special education. And the other thing is, there's a word in special education law called educational performance. And educational performance, by definition, is a myriad of areas. All right. And this is where schools mess up. Okay. Because I think a lot of it is just ignorance. It's just a lack of understanding of these definitions and how they play out. And schools get this obsession that, we're only education. Well, what's education, guys? Sit there and pinpoint what education is. Is it academics? Because by sheer definition, education would encompass everything, okay? And that's why we have related service personnel. Education can be learning to walk, talking. So it doesn't sit there and limit down to reading, writing, and arithmetic. It just doesn't. That's academics. That's a component of educational performance. But there's multiple areas of educational performance. And so you look at the three pillars, the main ones, okay, the three pillars of educational performance, and then we're going to talk about the other ones that are equally as important. But the bulk of the students that have IEPs are going to fit within the three. And then you're going to have a segment of the population that have IEPs that fit within, the other columns, okay? And then every student, when they hit transition, they're going to hit that transition area of educational performance when they're 14 or ninth grade. All right, so that's all students will hit that last one, but let's talk about the three main ones, all right? And that is communication, big one. That's one of the main prongs of educational performance, where you develop goals for an IEP if the child has need. The second one is academics. All right, makes sense, right? Okay. The third one is social emotional learning or behavior. Those three things: communication, academics, social emotional learning that includes behavior. Those are the three main ones. Then you run into looking at the child's deficits. There could be another one which doesn't impact as many special education students. So it's not necessarily understood or known. But that other area is functional skills, functional living, teaching a child to eat, kids that have sensory issues with regards to textures, swallowing, those kind of things. That's why we have related services personnel involved, like occupational therapists, behavior therapists, because both would have a role to play in something like that. Now, why is that? Well, that is part of just basic human rights with regards to a human's ability to, live independently and with dignity and, be able to progress is something as remedial as eating. It's the same thing with being able to toilet independently. That is such just a base level form of dignity to be able to do that independently. But yet it's not taught in many, many situations. Yet it's a functional performance area. It's a functional skill that some children within special education help adults they either can't. It's different, and I get that, but it is something that if the ability, if there is a chance that the child can learn those skills independently as a student, and I don't care how old they are within the education system, then that is a good, excellent, first and foremost functional goal that should be a priority on any IEP team. If a child lacks the independence to be able to toilet on their own. Now, why do a lot of them not like to do that? Because it's time intensive. It is, to do it right. And in those kind of situations, this is where I really love the behavior analytics, board certified behavior analysts, licensed behavior analysts, because they have scientifically proven methods, like the Azrin Fox method of toilet training. And yes, it's intensive. And yes, it is something that requires patience from adults and somebody to be right there. And I've had schools have to agree to do that. And we brought in behavior analysts to be able to do that. I know of many behavior analysts that they will actually go into the home, either private pay or through insurance, to help the parents with that method in order to help their child gain that independence. But you also have to think about how that also frees family members and caregivers as well, including the paraprofessionals and the teachers at school. So it's not just helping the child, you're also helping the staff, you're helping the family with the child's independence in this area. And it's such a base level of independence that it should be a priority. So any excuse with regards to a lack of staff, it's just an excuse. But if this has been identified, and this is where a parent is a member of the IEP team, so you're a valuable decision maker on that IEP team. This should be something that is brought up constantly if this is a concern, and you need to learn the lingo. You need to learn the language that this is an educational performance area in the category of functional skills, and my child lacks these functional skills. Therefore, we need to devote time, especially if your child is in a self-contained environment. I mean, and I get so sick of people telling me that, well, this is an educational. Self-contained environments are basically therapeutic settings. All right, they're not educational settings like general education. They are a specialized unit for kids determined to be requiring more intensive needs. So they may have a special education teacher inside, and they may have paraprofessionals, but they also have a lot of interaction with occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech language therapists. It is and a lot of them should have the involvement of a behavior analyst in order to work properly, because a self-contained environment will have an array of students and their needs. So therefore, that should be just an automatic with the other related service personnel, somebody that's involved with a self-contained environment. And if they're not, then I can't see how they're functioning properly and appropriately inside that self-contained environment. Why is that? Because one of the main reasons that we remove impacted children from a general education setting is their behavior impacting and impeding the learning of themselves and others. That's one of the reasons. The only other reason is severely cognitively disabled, and that's an IQ score below 55. So outside of that, there's not really a justification to remove kids from general education. So the behavior is a big component. So you move them to a self-contained environment, but the question doesn't go away. you still, in that classroom in a self-contained setting, you must ask that question again. Does the behavior of the student impact their ability to learn or impact the learning of others? And if it does, and behavior goals are needed, which is that educational performance area I talked about, where's the professional with the expertise to be able to teach and be able to train staff to a level that they need to in order to address those issues? Because the behavior of one child is impeding the ability to learn for the other children that may not have behaviors, but yet are in a special education classroom, a self-contained environment. So you see how it all ripples to where, so many of these problems can be solved with having the right mixture of professionals involved to help raise the bar for the teachers inside that class, for the paraprofessionals within that class, and at the same time, you have to have the right balance of related service personnel in order to support that. And that all goes into goal development and recognizing properly the deficits of the child to truly create an individualized program. This is not rocket science. These are very simple, basic, logical, progressive type of ideas that are encased in special education. And you don't have to have it spelled out, guys. I mean, we're all smart enough to understand that that's how you create individualized programs. And in order to provide a FAPE, you have to have the right combination of professionals, the right complement of professionals in there in order to support all the students and their needs. So functional skills become an important factor for many, many students within self-contained environments. Therefore, in James Galini's viewpoint, these are therapeutic settings, which is exactly where we teach these things, functional skills. So any kind of argument that school is just for education, yeah, I agree with you. They're educational settings, but educational settings also encompass therapy, therapeutic, you see, the broad term of education, academics, communication, social emotional learning, including behavior, functional skills, learning to eat, learning to walk, learning to toilet independently, learning to put your clothes on independently. All of those things those are functional skills that speak to the final or the mission of IDEA, of independent living, economic viability, and continuing education. That's the entire reason we fund special education. So I hope that helped. But how you would need to go about that is you have to sit there and approach that with the IEP team with this knowledge that I've given you about an educational performance area known as functional skills. And within those functional skills, my child needs to be toilet trained. And the professional group that has the expertise to be able to do that would be licensed or board certified behavior analyst. And then the staff need to be trained. There needs to be a goal. And within that goal, there needs to be benchmarks and there needs to be a clear pathway in how we accomplish that. And yes, it will be time intensive to a point. But I would rather spend the time up front than to string this out, because you look at the amount of time we spend helping children toilet that don't have those independent skills. And we don't look at this amount of time that is being spent doing that and how actually putting some intensive work in here actually frees time in the long term. Schools don't think that way. That's why you as a parent or you as a teacher advocate need to sort of help reshape the thinking on the IEP teams.